Emmy-winning editor Aaron Butler on the show today. I really wanted to hear just kind of more about your journey, how you first of all got into all this, because I heard you were originally wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah, I always thought I was going to be a lawyer for some reason. I thought it's good money, and I really liked games and rules. So I thought maybe I'll be like a lawyer, because lawyers are all about, knowing the rules, and I like to debate and I like to tell stories, which I thought, would be good, as a lawyer, but that didn't end up happening. Yeah, if you kind of go back, to the sort of earliest days, I always loved telling stories. And in junior high, like when I had my first English class and I got to write my first creative story, I was so excited. And I really just loved coming up with stories in my head. We had some challenges growing up. Both my parents struggled with drug addiction. And so we didn't always have like a happy household, and we lived on this little ranch. And so often I would go out to the backfield, with my dog Booney, and I would just make up stories in my head to kind of escape and to entertain myself. And so then when I finally got the chance, at school to be like, oh, you can write a story and it could be about anything you want. And I thought, oh, great. And so, I spent all this time writing the story and I was so excited, and I handed in, and, the next day everybody's getting their, graded stories back, and the teacher doesn't hand mine back. And I was like, that's weird. And so after she's like, see me after class. And I was like, So I go up and I see her after class, and there's my story sitting on her desk. And she looks at me and she says, where did you copy this from?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was like, I didn't. I made this up. And she's like, there's no way you wrote this. This is college level writing. And this is like in 7th grade. And then she's like, I'm going to have to call your parents. And I'm like, call them, because they know, they saw all my rough drafts, and I talked it out with them, all the different versions, and, all my ideas and stuff. And so basically my parents came in and told her, he wrote it, but she never really believed me. And, she gave me an A+ on the story, but I could tell that she never believed me. And that story went and won first place at the county writing contest. And she still didn't believe me. And so it actually turned me off of storytelling. And that was one of the reasons why I was like, oh, I'm going to become a lawyer instead. And so, but then, all through high school, I would always have writing assignments, poetry and essays and stories. And every time I would write one of these stories, it would win all these awards. But I was like, oh no, I'm not an artist. I'm not a storyteller. That's not for me. And then finally what happened was, one day I was watching MTV, and I was like, oh, this music video is terrible. I was like, I could probably make a better music video than this. And I grabbed my dad's camera and I started making music videos, and I started shooting and doing all these little skits and things, and eventually started getting all my friends to shoot videos. And for whatever reason, this became my form of storytelling. And, it was different enough from writing, that it didn't feel like, oh, this wasn't what I had, gotten shut down with before. Like, this is something new. And I totally fell in love with that, visual storytelling. And, so I went to UC Berkeley, and there I was, studying pre-law, because that's what I thought I was going to do. But in all my spare time, I was making these short films, and I started doing acting too. I love the theater, and started doing all these, taking classes and doing plays. And I kind of had a little bit of a cult following at UC Berkeley with my films, to the point where, one of my friends from high school who was in all my movies, and I just loved her. Her name is Rachel. Back then it was Rachel Vasquez, and she was like my muse. And she came to visit me one time in Berkeley, and we're walking down Telegraph Avenue, and someone stops her and is like, "You're the girl from the videos." And she's like, "How many people have you shown these to?" And And I was just like, a lot. And so, but I still didn't think like that I would have a career doing this. I just did it for fun. I did it. This was my hobby. I did it because it was what I loved doing. And I loved entertaining my friends. And but then my senior year at Berkeley comes along and I'm getting ready to take the LSATs. And my roommate, Scott Bonds, who I think to this day, was like, Aaron, like you love, making short films. Like, why don't you go to film school instead of law school? And I was like, can I? Like, it never even occurred to me that that would be an option or a path. And so I thought, well, during my senior year, I'll just get, like an internship at a production company and try it out and just see if I like it. So I sent my resume to 20 different production companies up in the Bay Area and didn't hear back from a single one because I wasn't a film student. I was pre-law. I hadn't taken any film classes. And so I was about to give up and just be like, oh, well, I tried. There was one last studio that I hadn't contacted. It was at the Saul Zaentz Film Center right there in Berkeley. So Saul Zaentz produced Amadeus, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The English Patient, Unbearable Lightness of Being. And he had this amazing film center there. And I just happened to call up this one company that was a documentary company. So I got lucky because, normally you call up and, I'm nobody and they just take your resume and add it to the pile and you never hear from them again. But that day that I called, the secretary was out and one of the producers answered the phone and she graduated from Berkeley. And so we kind of had a little connection and I was like, hey, can I just come in for an informational interview? She's like, sure, come on in. So I go in and, I'm sitting there in the waiting room and this guy comes by and he's like, hey, want to go get lunch? And I was like, okay. So it turns out that this guy is the owner, director of the company. But what I didn't know at the time was his name is Bill Jersey. I didn't know that he had been nominated for 2 Academy Awards and all these Emmys and was considered one of the grandfathers of verite documentary filmmaking. So I had no idea. And we went to lunch and we kind of hit it off. And he was like, let me see some of your work. And so I showed him one of the videos that I had made. And we got to the end and he was like, oh, you're an artist. And I was like, oh, no one had ever called me that before. And he was like, would you like to make a film with me? He's like, you've got a great visual sense and I'm about to do this documentary film and I think you'd be perfect for it. And I was like, yes, please. So I ended up shooting and editing this short documentary, and it ended up winning first place at the U.S. International Festival and first place in the New York festivals, and then it got acquired by PBS. And when I graduated from Berkeley, he offered me basically the lead editor job and the second cameraman position at his company. So I never ended up going to law school and I never ended up going to film school. Bill Jersey became this incredible mentor to me. He became my film school. He taught me so much about storytelling and I traveled all over the US and all over the world with him shooting documentaries and editing. We would, go out in the field and shoot and then come back and then I would edit him. And we're still in touch to this day. He's a great guy and so that was my start.
No, that's great to hear. I mean, like before we kind of move forward, I want to take a little bit back to when you were kind of still starting to be a lawyer, and felt that maybe, you didn't know that this was like a career, right? Like say maybe filmmaking. I think a lot of people can relate to that. Or, in some cases, for example, I brought up, like, for example, the money part, right? You think that success is maybe, being a lawyer, being a doctor, being an engineer, or sometimes maybe our family, for example, might not understand this desire to be a storyteller, be an artist, right? And maybe holds us back from pursuing what we are really meant to be doing.
Yeah, no, because I went through that whole, same process, when it started going, when I told my parents that I wasn't going to law school anymore and that I was going to try this film thing, they were like, huh? And But then once they saw my name in the credits on TV, it was like, wow. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, well, maybe this is real, because you never know. And it is, I mean, it is a difficult and challenging industry. I mean, you heard all of the kind of steps and sort of random things that had to happen, in order for me to land in this kind of perfect position. And it does take a lot of dedication. It's like, you got to really love it. But that's the thing. Like, if you really love it, you're going to be doing it, whether you're getting paid or not. And I think, and so that's what was happening with me. It was like, I did this all the time because I loved it so much. And so it didn't matter that I wasn't getting paid. But, I had done so many of these videos that eventually they started to get really good. And then, so that when I had the opportunity, and again, this was the 21st company that I approached, that's a lot, right? I mean, that's a lot of no's. That's 20 no's before I got a yes. And so that's part of it, is like, you got to keep going for it. And then the next part of it is, you got to show something. You got to be like, this is what I'm capable of. I've spent a huge amount of time practicing, my skills and practicing my art. And, here's the latest bit, so that somebody can see like, oh, wow, yeah, this guy has a lot of passion and he's already learned a lot just by himself.
Yeah. And I think also, I mean, you're right. You got to, obviously, that's the thing, right? You have to take risks. And you're gonna probably face a lot of rejection. You're gonna make a lot of mistakes, but that's the way you learn, right?
Yeah, no, you only learn when you fail. That's the tricky thing. If you just get everything that you want in the first time around, you're not learning anything. And it's like, no, learning comes from failure, and you got to expect it, and you got to be like, look. And that's true not only at the beginning of your career, it's through your entire career.
Right.
Everybody gets fired. Like, everybody quits jobs. Like, there's, you're gonna fail, and that's okay. That's part of it. It's like, sometimes you're not the right fit for them, and sometimes, they're not the right fit for you. And there's all sorts of things that can happen and go wrong. But there's something to learn from every single time that happens. And that's what's important, is like, okay, this is, maybe I made a mistake. A lot of times there's a red flag. It's like, oh, there's a red flag there and I didn't pick up on it, but now I'm not going to do that again. So it's like, be open to this process of failure, but also really focus on, what do I have to learn from this? And how can I, learn and take it forward,
And that's the thing. It's like, it's also about, I think a lot of this is, like you said, connecting with people. Sometimes, it's not even, look, how many talented editors do we all know? And most of us, obviously, we do a great job, right? But it's a lot of also that connection, and that it's okay if you don't have it with someone, it's fine. You just hopefully find them eventually, those people, that team, those creatives that you do connect with. But it can't deter you, say, if something doesn't work out, to necessarily say, you know what, I'm done. I'll never find a job again.
No, absolutely. And this is a very people, driven industry, and it's very collaborative, and it's very, there's a lot of, teamwork, and a lot of people all working together to create one thing. And yeah, sometimes you just don't connect with the people, and that's okay. It's like, and it's going to happen, and it's going to happen throughout your career. You'll try, because sometimes you'll meet somebody and you'll be like, oh, I like working with them. And you may work with them, again and again throughout the rest of your career. But in between, you're going to have to try working with new people. And then every time you work with a new person, it's like, it might work and it might not. But that's okay. That's just part of the process.
And obviously someone, early on saw something in you, whether it be obviously talent or just connected on a more personal level, right? And took you under their wing and became one of your mentors.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, we connected. We had a similar passion for storytelling and for art and for social issues and wanting to make a change and wanting to make a difference. And And so it all kind of fell, and we both had a very visual sense. And so it just worked out great. We were a good, connection. And I had a lot to learn because I was just, at the beginning of my career. And he had so much to teach because he had already had such this amazing career. And so we both had a lot to gain from each other, and we had a, great time. I think I worked for him for almost 4 years.
What did you learn about storytelling in the early days, especially working in documentaries, both shooting and editing?
I really found that, documentary filmmaking has so much writing, and I think that's what I kind of fell in love with at first. I kind of told the story earlier of, how writing was sort of my initial, love of storytelling, where that came from. And so when I discovered, when I started shooting and editing documentaries, I discovered, wow, this is really writing. So if you're out in the field, and you're shooting the story, in your head, you have to be doing sort of pre-edit or writing. It's like, oh, okay, well, I want to tell the story of what this person is doing in this moment. And what am I going to need to do that? Like, what could be the beginning of the scene? Okay, I need to shoot this, this, and this. And then it's like, okay, what am I going to need in the middle of the scene? Oh, I'm going to shoot this, this, and this. What am I going to need at the end of the scene? I'm going to shoot this, this, this. And you end up shooting, tons of different things. And then you bring it all back, to the edit bay, and you watch it all through, and then you start piecing it together from all these different things. And then again, you're writing, because it's like, these things can go in any order. And the interviews that you shoot, you could be using one line here, one line here, one line here. And you are crafting beats, you're crafting scenes, you're crafting, sequences and arcs and acts. So that process, it's just, that's what I fell in love with, was that crafting of arc and crafting of story, because it was another form of writing for me. So that was my initial, and it happens both in the field when you're shooting the docs and when you bring it home, and when you're interviewing people, you're asking all these questions to get all of their stories out of them,
Well, I think that's also the importance of being like a complete filmmaker, right? Having an understanding of, say, editing, writing, shooting, sound design, audio, all these things help you become just a more complete filmmaker and storyteller.
I agree. And the other side of it was everything that I learned from doing theater too. So, and now this falls more on kind of, in a way, the scripted side of things, because it's more about, what it is to be an actor and what it is to play a role and perform. And then I also I performed as an actor, but then I also started working as a theater director. And so having that experience, and it was really interesting because as a theater director, you're taking an actor, and they're giving you their performance, and then you start tweaking it. So you take a line and you say, hey, let's play around with this performance of this particular line. Let's change the setup a little bit. Let's change the payoff. And then you start moving them around the room. Okay, when you're doing this line, let's have you be crossing here. And then on this line, sit. So in a way, you are crafting the visuals, or the angles in a way. And so when I started editing scripted for the first time, it was like, oh, wow. The performance of the actor felt like choosing performance felt like I was directing the actor, and choosing the angles felt like I was also, moving the actor around the stage. And so these things all kind of feed in together. And so, but the point is, I agree, having all of these experiences, these different forms of storytelling and different aspects of the kind of the industry, it all feeds into this really great understanding of how to tell the best story possible, using geography, using performance, using rhythm, using music, using sound. Like, because I also, I did a lot of sound recording in documentary, and but being a DP, and where are you putting the camera, and how are you moving it, and when are you moving it? And yeah, all those things feed in. So I highly recommend to anybody, no matter what creative position you are, whether you're a director, whether you're an editor, whether you're a writer, try them all and you will learn so much.
Along the lines of trying everything, maybe you find something else you connect with, right? You never know.
It's true. And this happens. Sometimes people go to school thinking like, oh, I'm going to be, And actually, my husband, Mark Hartzell, is also an editor. And I think for him, he went to school thinking he was going to be a writer. But in one of his classes, he had to edit something and he instantly fell in love. And so you never know.
I guess, how is that working with, I guess, living with, married to another really talented editor?
The truth is that we are better together. Like, I would not be where I'm at without him, and he would not be where he's at without me. Like, and I think that's kind of, how the best relationships are, like, together we bring out the best in each other. We both have strengths and weaknesses, but we balance them out. And it's like, and we just encourage each other and we push each other. And yeah, we neither of us would be where we are without each other. It's that magic combination of the two of us together it's just a great combination, because he was an assistant editor when I met him, and he says, yeah, and I'd been editing for a million years, and he was like, I was the one who pushed him. Because he, it was like we kind of, fell in love. And then he was like, I'm going to have to up my game if I'm going to keep this guy,
Right.
and so very soon after, he made the leap and to editor on True Blood. And that was like, that was a game changer for him. And he's like, yeah, I probably wouldn't have done it. I would have been too scared. I wouldn't have done it unless you pushed me. And same with me. He got me involved with Ace, and he was always pushing me to get on bigger stuff, and and I had never thought about like submitting for awards or anything, and he was like, nope, you got to do it, you got to do this, you got to do this, and I did it, and then I started winning awards, and it was like, it was like, oh, you were right. And all of these connections on a lot of these big projects, a lot of these connections came from him, from people that he knew. And so, yeah, our careers have just fed into each other in this really amazing and powerful way. And we're both, completely thankful for each other, because we wouldn't be, where we are without each other. So,
you said you have an experience in theater. Does that make you think, connect more with the emotions and saying performances and choosing performances and when you are cutting something, saying scripted?
Yeah, I actually feel like working as an editor can be very similar to working as an actor in some ways. So for me, it's like, before, I'm watching a performance, I might go into my own life and relive a moment that reminds me of this scene that's about what this scene is really about, to put myself in the right space, to feel those real honest emotions, to feel what I felt in that situation. And then when I'm watching the dailies, anytime like I light up, I know, ooh, that's the honest one. That's the one that hits me. That's the one that makes me feel something. And so, it's kind of like, in a way, when an actor does the same thing. If an actor is trying to bring out a certain emotion, a lot of times they will go into their own lives, and relive a moment, so that they can feel that emotion and they can bring it out. And I think an editor can do that too. And in episode 205 in the second season, Stand Still Like the Hummingbird, this is the Rue on the Run episode. So the whole beginning starts with this intervention. Her family kind of springs this intervention on her at home, and she's been doing drugs again, and she has this suitcase full of drugs that she's been selling, and so she gets found out, and they basically like take the suitcase away without her knowing. And so, and this very dramatic, intense, situation kind of unfolds, and it leads up to this moment where she's like banging on the door, trying to get in. And so, I mentioned before, my parents both struggled with drug addiction. And so I experienced a lot of these same emotions, growing up, dealing with a family member who was struggling, and all the emotions that you'd feel, the being out of control, but the love that you feel for them, but being afraid. And I specifically had this moment where this one night, We had a restraining order against my mom, and my dad was actually starting to get sober at this point, and he had gone off to an NA meeting and had left us home. And he's like, look, if your mom shows up, you have to call the police. And so and of course she did show up. And so there's my mom banging on the door, and I'm like, God, I have to like call the police on my own mom. And it was so heartbreaking. And so so then, all these years later, I find myself editing this Euphoria scene where Rue is banging on the door, and it's just like, and it hurt. But I went back, before editing that scene, I went back and I relived all these emotions so that I could feel, because they are very complex emotions, because of the love for your family member, but also the fear and the pain and the suffering. And so when I'm watching, the dailies of Zendaya, playing this character, again, I'm really monitoring my internal world. And so every time I feel that little bit of pain, or I feel that little bit of love, or I feel that little bit, whatever that emotion is, I'm like, that's a good take, and it's like, I mark it, pull it up, I make sure that that the whole thing is filled with the most honest, the most powerful emotions, so that the audience can feel, some of what, it's both what I went through, but it's also, Sam Levinson, he wrote this, he struggled with addiction too, and he put so much of his life story into this character of Rue. And so it's all of our experiences, life experiences going into this character, and we're cooperatively, putting all of this emotion and then bring it out, so in the hopes that the audience will feel that emotion too.
Yeah, I think in general, I think as artists, we tend to be, I think, yes, we are sensitive beings. We are very emotional.
I do think there are, kind of two parts, to this craft. I do think there's the very, sort of pure emotion side of it. But then I think there's also, the logical side of it, where you can learn about how story works, and you learn about the science of emotion, and because emotion really is our medium, in a way. But most people don't even know how emotion actually works, or why it works the way it does, I mean, like,
right.
I know very few people, their entire careers are about crafting emotion, and yet they don't even know how it works. So I'm kind of a fan of, both sides of it. So on the first side of it, learning how to become, more kind of empathetic and become more sensitive. It's really about, so much of it, I think, is about knowing yourself, and it's taking the time to really become sensitive to your own emotions. And when you're in a situation, how does it make you feel? When something good happens to you, how does it make you feel? And where do you feel it in your body? Or when something bad happens, do you feel a constriction in your throat? Do you feel a tightness in your stomach? Like, I think that's the first sort of step, is to know thyself. It's to really, in a way, it's to like look at yourself as a character. If you were going to, edit a story about your own life, most of it you'd edit out because it's boring, right? But there are these moments in everybody's life, where you have great loss or great success, or both. There are these big moments of change, and it's survival change is what it is. And or when you fall in love for the first time, or when you have a first kiss, it's like there's all these big moments of emotion and change. And so that, I think, is the first thing, is to look at your own life as a story, and like pull back and look at yourself as a character. Like, what are the moments in your life, that you could tell, as a story, and what do those emotions feel like, and how did it feel, to go through all those things? And then I think, when you're going and doing a story with a different character, then it becomes a lot easier to relate. It's like, oh, this is their first time falling in love, and it's like, oh, I know what that feels like. So it's this in out, kind of reflection, and and embracing it's like of all those feelings and emotions. And so that to me is the big part. And yeah, I've done tons of therapy and journaling, coming out of a, challenging childhood. It's like you got to process all that stuff. And I think the best way to process it is to turn it into a story. It's to really understand deeply what you've been through and why and how and what did you learn from it and what were the emotions that you felt. You get that distance from it so that you can actually learn from it. And in a lot of cases, so that you don't repeat mistakes, because I think that's one of the things that happens a lot in our lives is, you kind of repeat we get these emotional habits and you fall in these holes and you just go fall in them again and again and again until you learn the lesson, and I think that's what a lot of therapy is about, is like giving you the awareness of falling in these holes and then giving you the tools to stop falling in the holes.
No, I'm really glad you bring this up because it's conversations that I've been having recently with friends and colleagues, and something that I also experienced as well recently, like the past, since the pandemic, I tried therapy for the first time and went through this whole kind of self-help, self-awareness time where I just really discovered a lot about me, and it helps me now connect more, I think, with the job. Honestly, learning more about myself.
Yeah, that absolutely. There's actually a great little like a little story that my therapist told me that I think applies so perfectly to storytelling. What happens is it's like chapter 1, you're walking down the street and there's a hole in the street and you fall in the hole and it's horrible. You didn't see the hole and it's painful. It's so difficult to get out. But eventually you're able to get out and you walk away. Chapter 2, you're walking down the same street. You see the hole, but you can't help it. You fall in again. It's like, and maybe this time you're not in there so long, you're able to, jump out. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit better, right? So chapter 3, you're walking down, you're like, okay, I know I'm going to fall in the hole, but I'm prepared this time. I know exactly what this is going to be like. You fall in the hole, you pop right back out, right? You're getting smarter. You're learning from this, Chapter 4, you walk down that street and for the first time you walk around the hole. And that's great. That's great. But chapter 5 is you don't walk down that street that has the hole.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid that street.
I know. So that's like, but I just think this is such a great metaphor, for both our own lives, but also for what story is often about. Story is often about that. It is about characters, learning a new way of life, and letting go of a way of life that is actually hurting them, that may have helped them at one point, because this is what happens is, we get these survival strategies that helped us at one point in our lives, but don't apply anymore. And it's this process of, changing that. It's a lot of what storytelling is about, but it's a lot of what life is about,
Exactly. It's just, yeah. No, again, I appreciate you bringing this up. I think we need to talk more about it and just a deeper way of looking at storytelling. And yeah, I believe in just simply having also just more life experiences. I think, we learn a lot from that as well. I want to just take it back a little bit because, you did, work a lot on documentary, but eventually you made your way into feature films and then scripted. I think Euphoria was your first scripted TV gig.
Correct.
And you win an Emmy.
I know, yeah. That's a pretty good start, right?
That's the great, man. Yeah, no. I mean, talk about that transition now from documentary to more scripted work.
Yeah, and there is a lot of pigeonholing in this industry, and I absolutely felt it. So I had, started in documentary and I loved it, but I had always wanted to try scripted and had a very hard time getting any jobs or even getting any interviews. The thing that changed, I did this HBO documentary called American Winter, and I got nominated for my first Emmy and Eddie for that. And then that opened doors. Like suddenly people started, to see me differently. And then I got offered my first scripted feature called I Am Michael. And that ended up getting into Sundance. And that led to an agent saw the movie at Sundance, looked me up, and saw that I wasn't represented, but they had seen American Winter and they were a fan of my work. And so they called me up out of the blue and they were like, hey, I think you have a lot of career potential. I would love to represent you. But they were at a small, kind of boutique agency. And I was like, well, let's keep talking, but I didn't want to say yes, to commit, too early, especially because, she was the first agent that I'd ever really talked to. So, a year goes by and she keeps sending me all these great, indie scripts. And I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. Then she got headhunted by Gersh, and Gersh is one of the, biggest agencies in the world. And she's like, Aaron, I'm at Gersh now, would you like to join me? And I was like, yes.
Absolutely.
So, because it was like I had this, boutique agent at a huge agency, because that's one of the problems with being at a big agency is that you can get lost, and if you don't have somebody who cares about your career, you may not get any interviews or jobs or anything from it. So, for the next, bunch of years, I kind of bounced back and forth between scripted features and documentary features. And I got nominated for a bunch more Emmys, and I won my first Emmy and got, nominated for another Eddie. And I had 3 films at Sundance and 1 at TIFF and Berlin and Venice, lots of scripted work. And but I was trying to get into scripted TV. And no one would even give me an interview, not with all the awards, not with 3 films at Sundance, nothing. And my agents tried and tried and tried. No one would take a chance on me because I didn't have any scripted TV credits. So this went on for years. And the funny thing that made it change was Kanye.
Wow.
So I get this call, one night and they are, Kanye's doing this project and they've gone through a bunch of editors that didn't work out, and they need somebody like now, because there was like 2 weeks before, the movie had to be in IMAX theaters in 40 countries, in 2 weeks. So it was like right at the end, and they needed somebody to finish this thing and land the plane. And so basically, like, the next day I was like, okay, sure, let's do this. The next day I'm, put on a private jet with the president of IMAX, and they fly me out to Wyoming to work with Kanye directly.
Wow.
And what I didn't know is they had already booked my flight back that very night, just in case I got
It didn't work out.
But it went surprisingly well that day. And I had, I came up with all these ideas and told them to Kanye, and Kanye was like, turned to the president of IMAX after the first day and was like, Aaron's the best editor we've had. He just loved my ideas. He loved my work. He thought I was an artist. And so, I sort of saved the day on that project. And then when I got back, my husband was like, hey, maybe you should meet with the TV people at Gersh. And I was like, yeah. And my agent, she was more of a feature person. So I thought, well, maybe that's a good idea. So I went in, and I got a meeting, but it didn't seem like it was, I was like, I got the name of the person who I was meeting with, and it was the senior vice president of Gersh. And I was like, wow, like, how did I get a meeting with her? I thought I was going to meet with the TV people. So I go in and meet with her, and she's like, I want to hear all about Kanye. She works with big celebrity projects all the time, and they're very challenging. They're very difficult. She's like, how did you do this? How did you land the plane? And so, she was amazing. And I told her my whole story, and she asked me, she's like, what do you want to do next? And I was like, I'm trying to get into scripted TV, and I can't even get an interview. And she's like, okay, good to know. And so, little time goes by, and then one day I get a call, and it's my agent and the senior vice president, and they're like, hey, Aaron, give us a call. And I was like, well, that's weird. So I call them up, and they're like, hey, have you ever heard of the show Euphoria? And I was like, Yeah. Because my husband
Yeah.
and I mean, we were obsessed with the first season. We were just so blown away by the filmmaking, by the editing, by the sound and the music and the creativity and the characters and the writing. It was just and we would just watch scenes over and over, like, what are they doing? How are they doing this? We were so impressed by it. And never in a million years did I think I would have a chance to work on it. So, so they got me an interview on it, and the senior vice president, had done a little bit of matchmaking. So she represented Julio Perez, who is the supervising editor on Euphoria. And so much of what makes Euphoria comes from Julio. Like, Julio has worked with Sam Levinson for years, and they're this like magic combination. They're so on the same page. And so so, but Julio wasn't looking for just a scripted TV editor. That's kind of the opposite of what Euphoria is. Euphoria is all about creativity. It's all about cinematic. It's all about spontaneity. It's about surprise. It's about the unexpected. So they were looking. Julio was doing the hiring for this position. He was looking for somebody who had indie film experience. He was looking for somebody who had documentary experience, because that's his background. And so he knew that, when you're a documentary editor, like, you got to be a really good storyteller. And he was looking for somebody with a cinematic, with that indie film cinematic kind of, way of thinking and looking at things. So, he had watched my documentary film, Cries from Syria, the HBO film. And he said it was one of the most devastating movies he had ever watched. And he was like, when he watched it, he was like, Aaron can cut Euphoria. He was like, Aaron can cut this. Aaron can cut anything. And so, yeah, in the first meeting I had with him, we talked for 2.5 hours. And it was this instant connection. We had sort of been, it was a matchmaking. And then, I ended up getting hired.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it could take a while, say maybe till you find those people that you connect with, right? And that
I was 23. I think I was 23 years into my professional career.
Yeah.
Before I, this connection, working with Julio and the rest of the Euphoria team and Sam, it was the best job I ever had. I never felt so like I was in just the right place. And I'd never felt so respected as an editor. Like, Julio and Sam have set up the most amazing kind of editorial there, where editors are considered artists and we are given creative freedom, but we're also held to the most insane standards. Like, you can take the time you need to cut the scene, but when you show it to us, it better knock our socks off. And so, but it was that like combination of like creative freedom and like the highest standards of Julio and Sam that I feel like it made me kind of blossom into, I think I did some of the best work of my life,
Yeah, talk about, I guess, that the team, because I know, I mean, it looks like, I know that you guys just have, it's all about teamwork.
So Julio has set it up, the post, to be super, super collaborative. So Julio is kind of like Sam's proxy, creative proxy. They are so on the same page. And so, before we send anything to Sam, we show everything to Julio. So this is like the first step of the collaboration. We show our first cuts to Julio and we work with him and we go back and forth and we play and we create and we try all these different things until we kind of land on like, okay, this is the, best kind of first version of the scene. Then that gets sent to Sam. Sam likes to watch stuff way before it's cut into an episode. He likes to kind of get stuff rolling. So, and then this is the next part of the collaboration, is that Sam will watch this scene and be like, oh, that's interesting. You're taking the character in this direction, or, oh, you're taking the story in this direction, or you're doing something. And then he will shift the shooting after that based on what we're doing in editorial. So there's this kind of like back and forth. Then working with the rest of the team, we bounce around on each other's episodes a lot. On the second season of Euphoria, we did 2 blocks. So the first 4 were episodes shot together in one block, second 4 in the second block. And so, on the first block, each of us were what we call shepherding an episode. So, there would be one person shepherding each episode, but, sometimes only one episode would get all the scenes. And so we would help each other out. So I would be cutting on, other people's episodes, and people would be cutting on my episode. And we had this really collaborative process, where we worked together and giving each other scenes and helping each other, and watching each other's episodes. And another thing that, one of the biggest parts that's kind of interesting about our collaboration is actually our lunches. The whole post team does lunch together. And we do these huge, long, epic lunches, sometimes an hour and a half long. And we sort of just play. We have so much fun at these lunches, and it gives us a chance to blow off steam. And sometimes we'll talk about, work directly, but most of the time we're talking about, what TV shows are we watching? Oh, what movie did we just see? What music are we listening to? Or we talk about philosophy, or we talk about life, or we tell each other stories about our own lives, And so we create this like really, really intense familial kind of bond. Then that just rolls right into us working. And I've never had such a intense kind of family bond like that. And it was such an important part of that collaboration, because we know each other, we trust each other, and that's why we were all working so well together.
Yeah, well, I think that's why it's so important I tell people, like, you got to put yourself out there. And that means by simply communicating your interests outside of work, right? To get to know you as a person.
Right.
Because that translates to the workplace and how you collaborate, how you share ideas. I think it's very important, and especially with lunches. I know some of us are working, say, from home, right? But I think even then it's important to connect. I think more importantly now, because we're not in offices, to have still that connection, to get to know each other as artists.
Yeah, and it's so important for creativity, because when you feel safe, when you feel like you're in a safe place with people who you trust and people that you like, you will be more creative, 100%. Creativity, if you're feeling scared, if you're feeling shut down, your creativity will be shut down too. It's not a good work environment. A work environment based on fear or mistrust, that doesn't create good work, and if you want to be creative, you need to feel safe and comfortable. You need to know yourself. You need to know who you're working with, and that feeds into each other. It's like we created that, and Julio, and Sam create this like safe editorial space where we can play and experiment, and we're encouraged to. We always do these alts, and it's like, oh, your scene works great, but let's try an alt for the ending, and let's try an alt from the beginning, and let's try an alt for the song. Let's play, because we will find new things and ideas. And so it's that, and again, we're talking about, this is a very person-based industry, and it's a very people-based industry. And again, if you feel safe, if you feel comfortable, if you feel protected, you're going to be more creative, and the work is going to be better,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Aaron, this show has incredible music, obviously a big part of the show. What's your process for, I guess, choosing, like, say, temp score or source music? How do you go about choosing the right cues for your episodes?
A lot of the music comes directly from Sam. He will actually write a lot of the songs into the script. So we, a lot of times we will start with those, but we don't always end up with them. We play a lot of King of the Hill with songs. So you put a song in, and then everyone will try to beat it. It's like, can you find something that's better? Can you find something that's more layered? Can you find something that's more subtle? Can you find something that's more ironic? Can you find something that's more surprising? And but I would say the majority of the music comes from Sam and Julio. Julio has an amazing musical mind too. The two of them are just like incredible. And then the rest comes from the editors, or the next kind of round, or the next level of music. So whenever we want, we can start with pretty much any song in the world, to start with. And, I'll give you an example. It was like in episode 2 of the second season that I cut. there's this moment where Maddie is babysitting at this rich woman's house, and she comes in when the rich woman's kid falls asleep. She goes into her closet and she tries on all her fancy clothes. And so I was like, okay, I got to find the like perfect cue for this. So, I was listening to Spotify, and this Judy Garland, track popped up. And I was like, well, this is kind of weird for Euphoria, but what the hell? Because it worked on a bunch of different layers. The song is about like, you're gonna love me. But Maddie is talking, she's dressing up in the mirror. So she's saying like, I'm going to be fancy, to people, like, you're going to love me. But it also kind of played like she was talking to herself, like, you're going to love me, Maddie. Like, I'm going to make you something special. I'm going to make you, so it played on these different, kind of, and it was this kind of, old Hollywood kind of feel. And so, everybody tries to beat it. So, Julio comes up with all these tracks, and then we have Jen Malone, who's our music supervisor, and she's awesome. So she's sending all these tracks, trying to beat it. And, Sam is sending things, trying to beat it. But that was it. It was like, it just worked. That happened to be the first, track we put in, and it worked perfect, and they licensed it. So like, that's like an example of, like putting in music or songs. And then for like temp score, a lot of what we did on the second season was we used the stems from the first season. So Labyrinth, amazing guy, super great to work with, really creative. And, we work with his music in kind of an interesting way. He doesn't always, write to picture. So he will give us all these kind of demos and little pieces and he's, super, super creative. And we'll take one of those demos and we'll put it in. And then when people like it, we'll be like, okay, now develop this. And then he'll keep developing it, and it'll get more and more interesting. Then he'll give us all the stems. So each musical instrument is on a different track. And then we can take those stems and take a little piece of this and a little piece of this, a little piece of this. And in some cases, that's what we did, for just using the first season score, but repurposing. So like, again, in the second episode that I edited, there's this scene where Cal comes in and he comes into Fezco's convenience store, and he's got a gun in his pocket. And there's this real tense moment where he's walking around, and it's like, oh, what is going to happen? It's like this kind of like Western, where everybody's eyeing each other. And so what I did was I went to the first season stems, and I pulled all of the Cal themes and all the Cal songs. And then I took a couple of particular stems, I think it was from 3 different Cal songs, and I used just one stem from each to create this kind of punctuated, tense, and it sounds completely different than, how it played in the first season, but it's using the same feelings, it's using the same instruments, it's this, and so it's a kind of theming, of Cal's character. And then, of course, we also use temp, just from any, from scores and things. But that's the basic process.
I have a question here from the Hollywood editing mentor community. Chris Kobe asks, he says, Euphoria episode 205. Whoa. For me, the show has this driving energy. It feels fast, even when a scene is slow. My question is, what is your approach when it comes to pacing a scene? Wondering if you map it out ahead, or maybe is it about a feeling you just have as you cut picture together?
Pacing is really, really interesting. And it does change, over the course of, as the scene evolves. And I think, a lot of times, on these episodes, you will get a scene and it's, basically by itself, because a lot of times the scenes will come in out of order. And so you may not know, from the script what's coming into it, and from the script what's coming out of it, but you don't quite have the, the feeling and the pacing of the episode as a whole. So you do your best on the first cut, to try imagine, like, what does the pacing of this need to be? Does it need to be really, is it very slow and tense? Do you want to be pulling out every little moment because the audience is going to be on the edge of their seat? Or do you want it to be snappy and boom, 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 moving around? And so on that first cut, you do the best, and it best you can with the information that you have. But a lot of it is just feeling. Yeah, it's like, and you may adjust it. And I know, we did this in particular with episode 5. Sam's direction for 5, when he saw the first cut of it, he was like, I want it to feel more rough. I want it to feel more dirty. I want it to feel more gritty. And, in a normal Euphoria episode, there's this amazing, cinematography, and the camera's moving and things are swooping. And there's a lot of sort of, very detailed, camera movements. But he wanted episode 5 to feel different. He wanted it to be more from Rue's point of view. We're following her the entire episode, and she's breaking down. She's going through withdrawal, and everything in her life is collapsing. So Sam was like, it's not about the perfect camera moves. It's not about even the dialogue. He's like, it's all about the emotion, and that's the only thing that matters. So cut for emotion, and cut. Go for imperfection, make it feel rough, make it feel raw. That's part of the emotional journey of this episode. And so that's what we did. It was like getting in there, and so the first pass was more kind of clean. And then I went through on the second pass, and I went and looked through the footage again a second time, and I pulled out all these pieces that were much more rough and much more, had more energy, and redid on that second pass. And it totally changed the pacing. A lot of times the music will change the pacing too. So, we'll be playing around with score, and on episode 5, we landed on Sam wanted to use this one Labyrinth track. Yeah, I fucking did it, which was actually what I had put at the end of my episode 2. So I had this kind of funny connection between my 2 episodes. So we took that and put that in, and then Labyrinth expanded it out and played with it. And once we cut that track in, it changed things again. Suddenly we could feel the pace of this music had this intense kind of drive. And so again, we re-edit so that the pacing is just perfect. Then once the whole episode is together, you got to feel it out again. It's like, oh, this scene is going to be really long and quiet, and then it's like, but then this scene needs to be like more like this. This scene needs to be more like this, and it's that. And we did rearrange a little bit, with some of the scenes, and some of the scenes were longer, and we brought them down. And, and again, it was just, and an example of pacing too is in the beginning of the show, the first 15 minutes before the title hits. So there's the intervention in the house. Then there's the moment in the car. And then she jumps out of the car, and then eventually we get the title. That's about 15 minutes. But the first cut of that, as scripted, was almost 30 minutes. And so that was a huge part of, we kind of watched it at 30 minutes, and we were like, it doesn't really work. And so they were like, Aaron, go for it. And here's where my documentary experience, comes in handy. So I'm like, I know exactly what to do, taking that 30 minutes. And once we got it down to about 15, it just popped. It just came alive. And so a lot of times it's just experimentation. You got to try things. Try pacing it up, try, slowing it down until it just feels right, until the emotion is as high as it can be. Because sometimes slowing it down, the emotion goes up. Sometimes speeding it up, the emotion goes up. And that's what you're always, trying to judge it.
Awesome, Aaron. Well, I appreciate you giving us some insight here into the work of Euphoria. And again, congrats on your Emmy win. And obviously looking forward to the next season. Oh, Euphoria?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'll be rolling into that sometime later this year.
Sometime. Well, awesome. We definitely look forward to that. Just want to have one more question for you, Aaron. I mean, we've talked a lot about great things today, great conversation with you. We've talked a lot about, taking risks, right? And following our path. And you talked to us about how you went from documentary to features to scripted. And we talked about, connecting with people. I mean, overall, now looking back at your career and your experiences, what do you have to say to those people out there that are looking for a career, as editors who are maybe still don't know if it wants to be scripted or documentary or features, and they're just starting out. Some words of wisdom here you would like to share with them in this community?
You never know, like, if you're going to like it or not until you try it. Because like, I never planned on getting into documentary, at the beginning of my career. That wasn't what I was seeking out. And I just kind of fell into it. But then I fell in love with it, and then, I didn't know if I was going to be really good at scripted or not until I tried it, and then fell in love with that too, And then the same thing, it's like with features, I loved the feature process, but I was skeptical, like, well, am I going to want to work on a TV show? And then I had an amazing experience on scripted TV. But, the thing is, you got to try it, because they're all so different, and they use different parts of our brain and different parts of our creativity. We may be better at one or the other. For me, it's like, I feel like I have two creative sides. I have my writer side, and then I have my like kind of actor director side. And so, the documentaries really tap into my writer side, and the scripted really taps into my actor director side. So I get really fulfilled, kind of bouncing back and forth. And I feel like I've gotten a lot. And I feel like my documentaries are more cinematic, and I feel like my scripted is more, I come up with outside of the box ideas for structure and things that that somebody else might, if they didn't have that documentary experience, might come up with. And so they feed into each other. But yeah, the advice is you got to try it. It's like, you never know till you try it. And it's like, get out there, cut a short documentary, get out there, cut a short scripted piece, and see how it feels and see if you like it. And if it really turns you on, then it's like, keep going.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you sharing some advice here with our community, Aaron. And again, wishing you much success here and your continued career here in editing scripted TV shows. But thanks again for being here on the Hollywood Editing Mentor podcast.
Thanks for having me. Take care.